Good morning. Thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here in Abu Dhabi Finance Week, especially in this track about sustainability and talking about AI regulation and governance. And it is important because we are all aware that AI is a very disruptive technology. And what does disruption mean? For me, disruption can be described in many ways, but I like to describe disruption as the end of the status quo. Something that we thought it was stable is not stable anymore. And we need to think about new instruments to achieve the stability and to encourage innovation while keeping, fundamental values in place. So the question about artificial intelligence regulation has been around since the early days of AI emergency. And there are many voices that say we should not regulate AI. Why? Because this is going to hamper innovation. And this is not true. And in fact, we have regulated technologies since the very early days of Industrial Revolution. Sometimes we have regulated working conditions. Sometimes we have regulated environmental emissions. We have regulated safety. Why this time should be different? So the important thing is that we have had already a lot of initiatives around AI governance and regulation in the last years. In fact, you see here that there were some initiatives starting in 2019, but it's clear before and after ChatGPT moment, where all of a sudden a lot of conferences, a lot of discussion about ethics, ethic guidelines, governance, and regulation took place in the world. Specifically, after ChatGPT moment, we just had 6 in 1 year. But in the first half of this year, last year, there were already 7. The most important landmark regulations have been the executive order by Biden-Harris administration already 1 year ago that will not be followed up by Trump administration. The G7 Hiroshima summit that came to international guidelines and ethical guidelines around generative AI. This is the Charter of Digital Rights that I led when I was the former state secretary in Spain. I was the state secretary of digitalization, artificial intelligence. And this one is me leading with my team the European AI Act, as was the leading negotiator of the European AI Act, that it is in place, and it is one regulation for 27 countries in the world. So there are a lot of initiatives at the national level on ethical guidelines, on regulation, and sometimes people try to misconfuse these 3 words, which are interrelated but are not the same. Ethics, governance, and regulation. Ethics, and I would say, does everybody agree that we need an ethical development of AI? I've found never somebody saying the opposite. Ethical means what are the principles and values that need to guide companies, developers, implementers, and also users, including governance, in this use of AI, without knowing that it's bringing innovation, but it's not, for example, affecting human rights, fundamental rights, safety, or health. Governance means what are the instruments to ensure that companies and governance are behaving ethically? Because ethics is subjective. Ethics can change from country to country, from culture to culture, from a CEO to another CEO. So while ethics is nice to have, it doesn't imply any accountability. It doesn't imply any rights. We do need instruments, governance instruments, to set up the right accountability mechanisms to ensure that both companies and users and governance use AI in an ethical way. And regulation is one of these instruments. But it's not the only one. We can use regulation, we can use market incentives, we can use transparency monitoring mechanisms. And that was the question that we had at the global level in the United Nations. So Secretary General Antonio Guterres posed his question. Do we need a global governance of AI on top of the existing efforts at corporate level, good practices, or even a regulation? Do we need for AI the same thing that we had to set up with atomic energy? Do we need an international agency of AI in the same way we developed the International Agency of Atomic Energy? And to answer that question, he gathered 39 experts among a call for more than 2,000 experts. I had the privileged to be the co-chair of this important lineup of experts. As you see in the first row, second place is Minister of AI of United Arab Emirates, Sultan Omar Al Olama, who is member of my board and has been a great contributor, not only in smart regulation, but also in the application of AI in healthcare. So this group of people, which is very diverse, we are representing 33 countries in the world, diverse in terms of gender and academia background, in public leaders, also private sector, having working during 1 year, from October 22 to October 23, and we just issued an interim report in December, but the most important part is the last report, which is a result of our work, that was presented at the United Nations General Assembly last September. And that report was called Governing AI for Humanity. So, in the report, what we first already detected during the report is that there is a need of global governance. Why? Because there is a global governance deficit on AI. This global governance deficit is in 3 areas. One, lack of inclusiveness. You've seen all those initiatives that I showed you in the beginning. There are only 7 countries in the world that participate in all these conferences. Only 7. There are 118 countries in the world that participate in none. Oh, surprisingly, most of these countries come from the global south. Why? Because everything we know about AI, everything that has been developed by AI, has only been developed from data from the global north, from computing power from the global north, and from talent from the global north. So there's a lack of inclusiveness, a lack of representation of data, data that allows us not to be biased by gender, by faith, by cultural heritage. Even a country like UAE, which is a very powerful, capable country according to the Tortoise Index. This is the Tortoise Index of AI, which is the top 50 countries in the world capable of developing AI. UAE stands for position number 25, and it only participates in 2 or 5? Sorry, in 2 of these initiatives that I mentioned before, only in 2. So there's clear a lack of inclusiveness and representation of diversity in the current models of AI. Therefore, we need an inclusive approach that is good for equity, for effectiveness and efficiency, and we need to network the existing organizations in the same direction and enable local systems and local environments for new entrepreneurship that have curated data, representative data, and also talent from local countries that find the solutions to the problems they have. Because we have the tendency in the global north to use technology as a new way of techno-colonialism. I developed the solution, I developed the technology, and I think that the rest of the world are going just to be the consumers of those solutions. No, we need to provide the tools that every country in their own needs find the solutions to their own problems. And for that, we need data, talent, and compute. The second important governance gap at the global level is lack of coordination. Look at how many different, just in the UN system, how many initiatives within the UN system exist around AI. Of course, there is a subject matter expertise I need to keep. Who better than WHO to assess the impact of AI in healthcare? Who better than WIPO to assess the impact of AI in intellectual property? But all these efforts cannot be in silos. We need a global coordination because AI is a general purpose technology that requires a holistic approach. And because this is not just a technological problem, this is a techno-social problem. Because it's going to affect society, it's going to impact the future of work, it's going to impact the environment, it's going to impact special collectivities like women, like children, and also other minorities. And there's a third important governance gap. Lack of transparency. And when there is no transparency, we cannot ask for accountability. Why we have no transparency in AI models? Because they have been mostly developed by the private sector. First of all, you see that the highest number of granted patents is from China, 80%, 20% by the US, and the rest of the world accounts for less than 2%. But if we see the number of foundation models, you see that more than 100 are just developed by the industry, but only 28 are from the academia. Why is it so? Why has been AI, for the first time ever, the most disruptive technology we have ever known, has not been developed by academia? Because academia didn't have the talent? No. Because the academia didn't have the funding? No. Stanford, Max Planck Institutes, CERN, they do have the talent, they do have the money. What they don't have is data. And the reason why this technology has been developed in the same data monopolies is because they had access to data, which is not transparent, and they have become black boxes. Because they are black boxes, we cannot ask for transparency. And without transparency, how are we going to adopt that mainstream? Because the only return of investment we can make from the huge amount of money that we are pouring in data infrastructure and AI development can only be paid back if we do adopt AI massively along all the industries. And for that, we need transparency on the models. And if you see here, also a high level of concentration is the United States, but Arab Emirates is appearing here as one of the top 3 among the top models. So we're doing really, really very good from this ecosystem. But we need transparency to ask for accountability. Bear in mind that, I don't know if you see, it's a little bit blurred, but the top 5 are Google, OpenAI, Meta, Microsoft, and DeepMind. Google is DeepMind, OpenAI is Microsoft. So that reduced the number of 5 to 3. So this is really concentrated in very, very few hands and very, very few powers. And because this is so opaque, there are a lot of risks that are preventing us to adopt AI with trust. We performed during the UN AI Advisory Body a risk poll analysis all over the world. And these are the top concerns of people and experts on AI. Concerns about information integrity, deepfakes, and also fake news. Also in abuse of power, in bias, also in safety. And you know, there are a lot of safety institutes that are going to prevent the misuse of technology, but this is not enough. There are long-term issues around safety and health, even mental health, but there are really present issues about fundamental and human rights. But the important thing of this is that not all the countries in the world have the same perception of those risks. And if you look at this, just highlighting the most relevant differences, because we have here Africa and Latin America, while probably would say the global north are more concerned on fundamental rights and safety, the global south is concerned especially on the use of AI for armed conflicts and the impact in the labor force. Look at that. That is Latin America, the top green one. The impact of AI to harms to labor from adoption of AI. So when we talk about sustainability of technology, in this case on AI, we should not only think about environmental sustainability. We need to think about economic sustainability, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. And these three things are intertwined. This is an important report that we did also together with ILO, the International Labour Organization, assessing the impact of AI in labor and the future of work. And this impact is not even. It depends on the type of work, especially the number of work that will be mostly affected will be clerical jobs. By the way, those who are mostly taken care by women. So the impact of hyper-automation and disintermediation of AI will not affect evenly men and women of certain positions than others. But there are three situations here, and when we're going to evaluate the impact of AI in labor, we need to understand these three different scenarios. We need to understand in our company, in our process, what are the tasks that can be automated, fully automated, hyper-automated, and therefore there will be a people replacement. So those tasks that will replace and automate people, what do we need to do? Re-skilling, because people do not have the skills. But in those areas where we can use technology to augment our human brain or find alternative strategies for the same problems, like is happening today in pharma discovery and research, where things like AlphaFold are bringing absolutely new perspective of pharmaceutical development, which is really dropping down the cost. There we don't need to replace people, we need to augment them. Then we need to do upskilling and cross-skilling. So it's not so simple, but it's possible because this is not going to happen overnight. We are not going to go to bed one day and wake up in the morning if this thing have changed. There is a transition period that we can monitor and we should monitor. Last but not least, let's talk of the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is the lack of sustainability of these AI large language models, which are not only consuming already a projected figure, 3% of the total energy in the world, but they are consuming huge amounts of water and doing emissions. For example, ChatGPT-3, GPT-4, it's already improved that, but ChatGPT-3 is emitting the same number of CO2 that 5 cars along all their lifetime. 5 cars along their lifetime. Is that sustainable? It is not. Just make a comparison. ChatGPT processes 1 trillion of tokens, exactly the same amount of neuron connections that our brain consumes. And you know, what do we need to make our brain work every day? 1 sandwich and 4 glasses of water. So there's a lot of room for improvement for green algorithms. Algorithms that green and sustainable by design, not developing the technology and then ask the public sector to deploy the infrastructure we need to have energy for free. Of course, the impact of this, the impact of data centers which are not sustainable, are changing energy policies as well. Because the battle for AI today is the battle of the control of energy. And we're going to see a nuclear renaissance, we're going to see, of course, small nuclear reactors close to data centers, but that will not be enough, because this consumption is only from the training phase. What happens with the inference phase? So just to finish, these are the clear recommendations and the instruments we propose for the global governance of AI. Mostly, 3 important ones that are already in place. An international scientific panel for AI, in the same place we have built the IPCC panel for climate change, to have evidence, scientific evidence and transparency on those models, on the risk, and also on the opportunities. This is already going. The only difference is that we don't expect to report every 6 years, but to report every 6 months. The second big instrument is an AI policy dialogue that stands for global cooperation and multi-stakeholder platforms to discuss of international standards and risk taxonomy. And the 3 important instrument is going to be a global fund for AI, a global financial effort with public and private sector, not only to invest in these local ecosystems we need, in facilitating computing power to the global south, but also investing in AI for sustainable development goals. Only this, we're going to be sure to make AI work for the good of humanity. Thank you very much.